What happened at the Cannabis Control Commission, you guys? That's right. They say where there's smoke, there's fire. And lately, it seems that the smoke is blowing from the Cannabis Control Commission. That's right. From high staff turnover rates, slow rollout regulations, and lengthy wait times for licenses, ongoing governance issues, and an alleged hostile work environment, Massachusetts officials are saying enough is enough. In a quote, the Cannabis Control Commission has faced what sometimes feels like an endless stream of scandals, said Senator Michael Moore, Democrat from Millbury. In a statement requesting an oversight hearing, which happened last week, the public deserves to have some accountability on why these issues have proven so hard to stamp out, he says. With the CCC requesting a 23% funding increase during fiscal 2024 budget negotiations, Moore says it is critical the agency has plans to right the ship, since millions of our tax dollars are at stake. Moore filed legislation to create an internal special audit unit within the commission. If passed, the legislation would delegate oversight responsibilities to an audit unit within, but not subject to, the commission's control. Moore has since filed amendments to create a receiver for the commission under the Economic Development Bill, but the Senate rejected the amendment. The only hope for a receiver would be through his initial legislation in February, which is stuck in committee. Last week, Inspector General Jeffrey Shapiro asked the state legislature again to appoint a receiver for the commission before the end of the term on July 31st. Shapiro hopes the receiver will turn around the leaderless commission as the legislature works to reorganize the 7-year-old agency. Man, it's just a baby. In a quote, the Cannabis Control Commission is a rudderless agency without a clear indication of who is responsible for running its day-to-day operations, Shapiro said in the statement. However, Acting Chair Ava Chandler Concepcion disagrees with these sentiments, saying her staff are hard at work growing and maintaining a safe, effective, and equitable marijuana and adult use marketplace. The cannabis industry has generated more than $7 billion in sales for the state, she pointed out, and Concepcion also says that a receiver would come in cold and stymie productivity, just as our hiring process for a permanent executive director is underway. So how did the Cannabis Control Commission get to this point? Well, back in November of 2016, slightly more than half of Massachusetts residents voted to pass ballot question number 4, which legalized the possession, use, and production and sale of adult use cannabis. The following year, Massachusetts created a new agency, the Cannabis Control Commission, to support the implementation of adult use. The regulatory body comprises 5 commissioners appointed by the governor, the attorney general, and the treasurer. There has been a high turnover rate among leadership positions at the commission in recent years, and in May of 2022, Steve Hoffman, the agency's then chair, resigned months before his 5-year term expired. He was the only remaining commissioner of the 5 people initially appointed to the oversight body in 2017, and he did not give a reason for his departure. Only a year into office, Chair Shannon O'Brien, a former state treasurer and the 2022 Democratic candidate for governor versus Mitt Romney, was suspended from her position in September of 2023 after an investigator's report concluded that O'Brien made racially, ethnically, and culturally insensitive statements, including public statements that could reasonably be perceived as creating the impression that diverse candidates were not qualified for the CCC role.
That's fucked up.
After much discussion and debate, the commission appointed Concepcion as the acting chair and has continued to vote her in as acting chair at subsequent meetings. The inspector general says that the turnover leads to confusion regarding who's in charge and who manages whom, and frustration over the ongoing public drama. The commission has more than 20 vacancies, and many are critical leadership positions, including executive director, general counsel, chief of investigations and enforcement Enforcement, Deputy General Counsel and Enforcement Chancellor, and an HR manager. They have no HR manager. That's great. Questions over the mediation efforts are swirling because towards the end of Hoffman's reign, he began to work to get a mediator to get buy-in from the commissioners, executive director, and staff of governance. The Inspector General notes that these efforts have lasted longer than the employment of several commissioners and professional staff, including those seeking mediation. Between June of 2000 and December of 2023, the commission held 16 executive sessions to discuss mediation and its governance charter and paid at least $16,000 for the work. In response to the Inspector General's, Concepcion said in a letter that a blueprint for a governance structure is the final stage of a legal review and will be discussed at a public meeting. The challenges at the commission are far from secret, the letter said. We are committed to resolving them, in an additional quote. But other issues have rallied the commissioners as well. Exactly, because in January of 2022, the death of Holyoke cannabis worker stirred up the commission, especially since it took months for the commissions to learn about it. The executive director at the time decided not to share the news, raising questions about who was in charge. And in March 2023, a data breach occurred in which the commission sent a cannabis blogger a spreadsheet containing 17,000 rows of cannabis employees' data and other confidential information. In September 2023, a state audit found that over $10,000 of produce contained materials past the expiration date for testing, which could result in a potential public health risk and loss of consumer confidence. In December of last year, the commission voted to eliminate the two-driver rule, which requires marijuana deliveries to be handled by two drivers because it adds significant cost to the service. However, by the May 9th meeting, the commission indicated that removing the rule was several months away, adding confusion and lingering costs to marijuana businesses. In addition, there have been complaints about the length of time the Cannabis Control Commission takes to process registration applicants, as well as conduct investigations and complete enforcement actions. One of the intentions of the initial ballot question was to open social cafes, but the commission has yet to formalize a license for a social consumption business. In a quote, "For the last 8 years, we could have had a whole new industry," said Moore. However, Concepcion notes that the commission has accomplished a lot over its short tenure. After 6 years in existence, she notes the industry is producing $1 billion in sales annually from adult use marijuana establishments. Yeah, like that's not your job. You're touting something that the industry did, not something that you did, but nonetheless. The industry also provided $322 million in tax and non-tax revenue in fiscal year 2023 alone. And in June, the commission approved a measure allowing the legal transportation of cannabis to Dukes, Nantucket counties to counter an illicit market surge during the tourist season. Is that what they're calling it? Interesting. Enforcement actions include one of the largest fines ever issued to Trulieve in Holyoke for $350,000 for unsanitary conditions and workplace safety issues. And I find it interesting they didn't mention that one of the employees died, but it doesn't mention that. But nonetheless, it did. Yeah, it doesn't. In a quote, "With a new executive director on the horizon, the commission is on the precipice of writing a new chapter," Concepcion said in a statement, "and one that builds on our work expanding and maintaining a safe, well-regulated, and equitable cannabis industry." Well, I know you guys, after all that, want to know what's next for Massachusetts, and the Inspector General calls for action by the soon approaching end of the legislative calendar year on July 31st. And a quote says, "I do not make this recommendation lightly, but I do make it urgently," Shapiro said in a statement. "Waiting until the next legislative session to begin is fraught with risk and uncertainty that will impact our emerging industry that is already struggling to gain a solid footing." Even though Moore's amendment to create a receiver for the commission through the economic development bill failed, there's still hope that initial legislation could come out of committee and pass. He said that if nothing is done, it will start to affect the viability of these operations and the potential for new companies to enter the social equity program, which helps establish cannabis businesses in communities that have been disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition and enforcement. Because cannabis sales are still federally illegal and subject to strict restrictions, restrictions, lenders are not financing any of these stores. And in a quote, so there's personal money at stake here, said Senator Moore said. And Moore said, for someone investing their life savings to start a business and fall in this mess, there is a potential for seeing your life savings disappear before your eyes. Wow. Well, I think that Massachusetts getting a receiver is just par for the course of how this whole cannabis industry has been rolled out. And I may even go as far as saying that Massachusetts with this may be an even bigger mess than New York. But I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all got to say about this?
I mean, Massachusetts is a dumpster fire, is what they are. They're not a mess. They're a dumpster fire.
They're a dumpster fire.
I mean, I think the fact that a government entity is getting a receiver is insanity to me. I'm still trying to just wrap my head fully around that.
I'm so with you on this. So with you on this.
Like, you guys fucked up that bad. They're like, you can't run the government anymore.
Yeah, you can't. Like, the government's going to put a government-appointed receiver in to control the government. I think this is so perfect for the state of Massachusetts.
It was so fucked up. Rico left.
I mean, it's 9:30. Fair enough. What do you have to say about this, Yarrow?
Well, a couple things. I think conception means like the birthing of something.
No. That's their last name. That's her last name.
Right. When this lady was quoted, she was birthing bullshit because she was talking about the work that they had done instead of acknowledging the challenges. And I think the most important thing in life is we can't save our face and our ass at the same time.
100%.
And her quote leads me to believe that she's trying to save face instead of ass. And I think what's really important for fledgling organizations or departments that are facing challenges, the most important thing is to acknowledge those publicly and to speak to that versus the spin. And so when she's talking about the work that they've done, you don't get to a place of almost being under receivership if you have a winning hand and you're executing properly. And so for her to not really acknowledge that at the beginning of her quote feels tone deaf to me. The other thing that's challenging for me is that they talked about having almost $1 billion in sales. They don't get to take credit for that, as you pointed out, Jason. But what hurts me deeply is the $323 million in taxes. $323 million in taxes on $1 billion in sales is still a structure that doesn't work for the industry. And so if these people want to earn their keep, aside from getting out of their own way, aside from being much more aggressive in their deliverables, the best thing that they can do for this industry, aside from the consumption lounge component and allowing the delivery, which they're doing, is to create tax reform, meaningful tax reform, to get off the neck of the industry and to allow the industry to thoroughly flourish and thrive. And it's only with that I think the illicit market becomes less attractive to consumers. And so I don't have any faith in these people, and I don't understand why, if they're on the precipice of receivership, they're not already in receivership. Like, what are the things that they have to continue to mess up in order to finally get into receivership? Like, with kids, you kind of like, you put them in a timeout, right? In hockey, you put people in the penalty box. And from what I can tell, these people deserve the penalty box and a timeout, and neither of those has occurred yet. And
they deserve a spanking.
The question is, a spanking or even waterboarding at a black site. At a what?
Oh, wow.
At a black site, which is what the CIA called its undisclosed locations, where we allegedly incentivize people with questionable techniques. But the thing that's challenging for me is I feel like these people are competing to be the New York of High at 9 News.
That's what I'm saying.
They're just going to give me so much material.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to hold fire. I'm not going to be diplomatic. I'm going to point out every single time how bad they are. And then the question is, how much are they getting paid to do such a poor job?
Well, speaking of which, that brings me to my other thing about if they get a receiver. I wonder how much of this tax revenue, because, the receivers, they have no accountability pretty much whatsoever. They just get to run in there and just do whatever they do.
No,
and
that's not true. They have to give detailed billing.
They just put whatever on a paper and whatever, and it gets filed or whatever. They have zero accountability at all whatsoever. Okay. There's no one that's going to say, oh, you ran our business into the ground while it was in receivership. No. That is not.
Well, usually the business
receiver of the High
and that's why the receiver
Times
is
got
appointed.
fired, Jason. So if we talk about recent receiver processes, the receiver for High Times got let go. So I think there's enough accountability that those people aren't granted an indefinite opportunity to be the receiver. But I also think it's important to remember receiverships happen when you're triaging a situation. They are making the best of a worse situation. They're trying to keep the patient alive. And if in that process they're crude, or they're not understanding all of the nuance, or they're not capitalizing on all the strategic opportunities, that really isn't their job. Their job is just to stop the bleeding and to be able to get it past whatever got it into receivership.
Correct. And they actually are accountable to the court, and they do have to report on a monthly basis. There are continual hearings where they have to give reporting of both financial and procedural things that have happened. They have to give accounting of their billing. They're not just in there playing Candyland and having a great day. Like there's checks and balances to make sure the receiver is controlling the property. I know. I get it.
Total.
Jason and I have both dealt with receiverships, and they're fucking miserable. They are miserable.
They are. That's why I think the government should totally get a receiver.
But I also do receiverships, right? So, like, I will say that, as
hey, Massachusetts, she's available to be your receiver.
Actually, that'd be fucking
That
dope.
would be great.
I sure am.
That would be great. Massachusetts,
who actually knows what
reach
they're
out to
doing
us
to it.
over here at High 9.
Hit us up.
Yeah, maybe we can definitely help you.
And I think I would love to actually see a lot more of these entities.
I'd like to see New York's municipality go into a receivership too. That would be fantastic.
I would like to see a lot of them go into receiverships. I think that there's a lot of misappropriation of funds, and a lot of people that are these bureaucrats that are tasked with running these industries that they don't understand are just playing with a nice title and a lot of money, and it's our money, and I would like to see it used appropriately.
Fair enough.
Well, here's where I want to disagree with you. I don't think there's as much misappropriation of funds.
There is.
Because that's an easy thing to catch,
I'm
right?
a treasurer.
And I think that creates a trail that is pretty damning. What I think there is a misappropriation of opportunity. And the longer these people take to allow the industry to have clear guidelines and for people to get their business running, they're misappropriating the cost to entrepreneurs that have to stand up their businesses, that have to pay for intellectual property, that have to pay for a lease on a building until they're able to open. And so what they're grossly misappropriating is the opportunity to create an industry that can create winners and profitable businesses. And that alone should be damning enough that these people could be held to a much greater level of accountability. And God forbid we suggest a performance, a pay scale based on performance. I would love it if these people worked on commission.
I mean, well, we don't want to work on commission because they'll claim all the tax revenue is the money that they collected, just like they did in this article.
How about paid per number of doors they allow open for dispensaries in New York? If the entire Office of Cannabis in New York only got paid based on the number of brick and mortar dispensaries that they approved, they'd have been eating ramen for the last couple
you'd have a whole bunch of homeless legislators.
That's right.
Fair enough.
I mean, misappropriation of funds maybe was not the right word. I think that there's a tremendous amount of money that's going to these.
They definitely misappropriate funds.
For sure. But I think that there's a tremendous amount of money that's going to these overinflated salaries for these people who don't even know how to do their job, much less do it. Like, we're looking at Massachusetts, who has taken 2 years to write their own goddamn job description. What are you doing? What are you doing? Because you can't tell us. We can't see it. You've ruined this industry. You've fucked over everyone that you're supposed to be supporting. You're supposed to be regulating. Like, you still can't tell us what your job description is 2 years later.
Maybe that's because they don't actually have a job description, because they don't do anything based off of what's going on in Massachusetts.